I grew up hearing the preachings and the teachings. Your righteousness is as filthy rags. You're unworthy of salvation. You have to sacrifice yourself. You have to worship someone else and esteem them higher than yourself. Like all of these things are made to keep you small, to keep you blindly believing in something without asking the questions. So you don't do your homework and your research on a person. You're just happy that they show up and they're there. But you're going along with stuff despite how you actually feel on the inside. You're told not to trust your heart, that the heart is wicked above all. Lean not to your own understanding. Like these are scriptures that I have heard, and it teaches you to not look into and trust your own intuition.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Truth That Heals podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Anthony Hernandez, and today our guest is a certified life coach who helps women break toxic relationships, who breaks toxic relationship patterns for the lives of love they deserve. Please welcome our guest today, Porsche Angel. Porsche, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
And thank you so much for connecting with me online. I'm thrilled to have you. And this is something new because we're going to be diving into love and patterns, behaviors. This isn't something that I've really spoken about with anybody on this podcast when it comes to love. Usually it talks about other things, but love is also something very important. So before we really dive into the heavy stuff, can you give us an overview of what is the work that you do?
Okay, so a brief overview. I help people, specifically women, transform their relationship stories and experiences into the ones that they deserve. Sometimes it's being chronically single and feeling like you're always looked over. Sometimes it's being in a dead-end relationship and knowing that you need to walk away from that situation in order to give yourself a fresh start. Sometimes it's coming out of something that's completely abusive and toxic, and how to heal from that so that you don't attract that in the future. And then sometimes it's, I don't know how to get into anything committed and I want marriage. Help me do that. And that's where I step in to lead ladies down the path of engagement and marriage. So that's a brief overview of what I do.
So it sounds like you're doing a lot of healing work with a person and also maybe working on confidence and a few other things. But to really, before we even go even deeper, I wanted to step back and kind of get to know you a little bit more. What drew you to this profession?
Ah, growing up, I was always the child, the friend who everyone would come to for advice. I think it started, well, I know it started with my mother. I remember when I was probably 0 to 7 years old, I would play like I was her doctor or her nurse. And I don't know who started that. But when I got into middle school, the principal of my middle school saw something in me and said, I want you to be a peer mediator. And so kids would go through different things and they'd be ready to fight. And then the principal would call me into the room to mediate the situation, to diffuse things, to come to an understanding between this student and that student, and everybody would be good. And then it became this desire by the time I'd gone through my own therapy journey in high school that I wanted to be a psychologist. And I started that as an undergrad in school. Didn't graduate with a psychology degree, but the desire to help and impact youth at the time, my audience was youth, it was there. And so full circle, going down a bunch of avenues and industries for work and all the things, it's always been innately within me to be able to see things, to be able to help guide and navigate people. And so I've been doing the work forever. I just finally realized who and what I actually needed to be doing from an aligned space and decided to go full time with it last year. And it's part of my story as well, having been through so many relationship crashes and burns and finally making the quantum leap from a land of dating hell into a healthy partnership in marriage that's breaking generational cycles in my family of single women who don't have that story. So for me, it was important to be able to not only have it for myself, but to pay it forward and help other people experience the same thing.
And so you just started going full time. Was it, you said this year or last year?
Last summer, so summer of 2024.
And how much of a jump was that for you? Did it feel scary or did it just feel right?
It felt a little bit of both. I got really, really sick to the point where I could not continue my full-time corporate job. And so I was kind of forced out of work, so to speak. And being in that state of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Because I don't feel like I can breathe. Am I going to make it through the night? I had to really focus on my health. I couldn't focus on working for anybody else. And so in that period of not being able to work, the earlier portion of 2024, there's something about being faced with your own mortality that really puts things into perspective. And I just got the revelation I am driving myself into the ground for someone else's business. And how much stress has this put on my body? And am I doing what I've been called and feel aligned to do versus what I've positioned myself to do to collect a check? That's what transpired for me. And so it was scary to launch something because in the past I may have launched something and maybe it didn't do as well, And so there are all of those feelings like, how are you going to do this? Where are you going to get the money to live? Like all of those things, came up. But I was also very excited because I knew the transformation I'd been through and I knew the work that I had done it was real. And I started working with close friends of mine and I started seeing transformations happen for them. And I'm like, I got to do it. I got to see this through. So pushing through the fear is what it's been. And it's been a good journey overall.
So you're working at a corporate job, they kind of push you out, but also you're saying that despite the fear, you're getting into something that you feel called to do. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, actually, it was not just me going through my own physical situation, but it was coupled with the passing of my paternal grandmother. And I don't know what came over me, but it was something that really lit a fire under me to really walk in my higher self, to become my greatest version. Because I just became more in touch with, I don't have forever. I don't have time to waste playing small. I don't have time to continue to build someone else up while all of my gifts and everything that's within me to give to the world just gets continually pushed on the back burner. And so that I think was the difference for me was realizing the reason I had to go through this journey of leaving the familiar comfort zone of working a 9 to 5 versus doing something that was very unfamiliar, uncomfortable, and scary was because I knew that it was a soul assignment. I knew, and I don't know how to really explain it beyond just a clear cognizance of just knowing. If I don't do what's within me to do, that's been with me since I've been a child, if I don't do it, at the end of my life, am I going to be able to say I came to earth and I made my mark and I impacted my community and the world in the way that I was meant to? I knew if I continued down the same trajectory I was on, I would not be able to say yes to that question. And so when I sat with that, I realized this has to be a calling because if I'm not teaching and helping people transform and evolve and become their greatest self and have breakthroughs like I've had, there's a part of me that's missing or not feeling fulfilled. That's how I knew it was a calling, and that's how I knew I had to continue doing it.
Well, thank you for following that path where you feel that even from childhood you were kind of going in this direction. So it also takes a lot of faith, personal faith, and trusting one's gifts, one's talents, and also acknowledging what you have. So now that you're doing the work that you do, or before we get to that, before you started doing the work that you do, did you have like a life coach or a mentor who was guiding you?
I've had many. I've had so many for different areas of my life. I had one when it came to my spiritual awakening and spiritual healing. I had one when it came to my physical healing and overcoming autoimmune issues. I had one when it came to business. So I've had different coaches over the years of my life, more specifically the last 10 years, to help me. And even now, I have a coach. I think it's always helpful to have a sense of accountability, no matter where you are in leadership. I think even more so, it's a perfect balance of checks and balances to where I'm constantly growing and stretching and evolving and healing on whatever level. So I'm in a healthy place to help somebody else do it as well. I didn't want to be, the nurse who was addicted to cigarettes, or the starving baker where I'm giving everything out and I'm depleted and I'm the one who needs services at this point. So I highly advocate making sure that I have something and someone to pour into me as I pour into others.
And I think it's very good that you mentioned about the different like different categories when it comes to having coaches. You can have a coach for your physical health, for your spiritual well-being, and there's also mental health. But you bring something that's very unique, and that's relationships. It's unique to this podcast because we've never gotten into love and relationships and patterns. But now that you're doing the work that you do, what do you notice, or where is something that women in particular are needing the most help in when it comes to relationships?
Oh my gosh. It's a laundry list, Ryan. Like, where do I begin? I'll start here. In my target market research and in just general conversations with women and specifically with my circle of girlfriends, I have to call us out to the carpet, us as women, because one of the biggest issues that I have noticed is oftentimes we don't think that we can do any wrong. And that is part of the biggest problem with really any relationship, men included. But since I'm talking about my target audience, I have noticed, even in working with a select group of men in my research, men often come to the relationship table realizing that they're going to screw up on some level. Most men do. That it's the you just always hear jokes about it. What's the secret to lasting for 25 years? Always say, "Yes, honey, you're right, honey." It's there's things like that are always said, but the underbelly of truth with that is that men typically come to relationships thinking that they've got something to learn, that they're not going to understand women. They have this thing about them that is really admirable when it comes to learning. What I've noticed with us as women is we tend to come to the table with the complete opposite mindset. I'm right and I'm always right, no matter how wrong I may be in a situation. And by wrong, I mean it's not so much what we do, but sometimes how we do things. And so, because we come in with inherent blind spots, we don't take the time to look in the mirror to say, how am I showing up that's contributing to a particular situation? Or how am I not showing up that's not giving me the results that I say I want? Am I willing to go and get individual counseling to work on myself, or am I so busy pointing the finger at someone else that I'm not looking at my half of the equation? I would say that that is Number one, because when you're in denial, you can't heal what you're refusing to reveal. You won't even acknowledge that it's there. So I would say that is that is where it oftentimes starts and stops.
So when you present this truth to some of your clients, how do they take it?
Well, it's certainly not a walk in the park. I can tell you that because no one wants to hear you're the problem. Nobody wants to hear that. But I often temper it with understanding how we've been wired to behave. So when we look at ways of being and patterns, it's often helpful to recognize we had help getting to where we are. We didn't just show up today being controlling. We didn't just show up today walking in low self esteem. We didn't just show up today in desperation. We didn't just show up today people pleasing. A lot of these things, they are bred into us from inception, really, because things are passed down through the bloodline. And then we develop characteristics by way of our wiring from childhood, from the people we grow up with, from the things that we are constantly being shown in our families. And so I do that type of deep dive inner work to help people understand this is where that comes from, what your how past experiences mold us into becoming the people that we are, whether we like it or not. But being able to recognize and acknowledge and work through those things provides the greatest freedom. It's daunting at first, but on the other side of the bend is where the true breakthrough is, because now you have the empowerment and the knowledge to operate and move differently to get a different result, which is often what I have to lead into the conversation with when I'm sharing these things with my clients.
So what I'm hearing is a lot of generational upbringing. These patterns become behaviors, and sometimes it might feel like it's just so cemented. But with your help, and when someone agrees to allow you to help, what kind of transformations have you seen?
Ah, ah, I have seen outside of myself, I've seen the girl who was just constantly in a cycle, just a revolving door cycle of men, toxic, volatile relationships. Like these are relationships that may last a period of a couple of months to a couple of years. There's never any growth or long-term commitment. There's never an I do. There are always excuses. She's being strung along. She's giving her body away and not getting anything in return, including commitment, love, company, all the things. I have seen that profile of a woman step into a healthy relationship and get engaged to the person that she absolutely adores. I have seen the woman who has been chronically single, so the complete opposite. She did not have anyone that was seemingly checking for her, was afraid of men in a certain sense because of some traumatic situations that she had in, childhood. Um, and now she's happily and excitingly dating for the first time in over 4 years. That was never her story. I remember having one client, she called me on the first date that she had since we started doing our coaching work. She was like, oh my God, I'm shaking in my boots. I can't believe that I'm doing this. It's been 4 years since I've been on a date, and what the hell? But even having the courage after going through the inner healing work together to be ready and willing to do that speaks volumes, because she was so comfortable hiding and not wanting to be seen because of her past trauma. And so those are some examples of people breaking free from the past restrictions that have kept them stuck where they really don't want to be, and being able to experience a different narrative.
And do you also help people who are already in a relationship?
I can. My main audience, or target market rather, is for women who are not in a long-term committed relationship. Although I will say, when I have talked to those who are, I have to be honest with them and tell them if you're going to work with me and if you're going to go through this journey of transformation, you have to be willing and ready to accept the fact that you may not be in this relationship when we are done working together. Because if it's toxic and it's unhealthy and it's damaging to your self esteem, you're going to likely be challenged and prompted to walk away. Are you ready to do that? Because if you're not, then you're wasting your time.
Mhm.
You're wasting your time and mine. And I am here for the healing, the breakthrough, and the transformation. So I oftentimes don't work with people who are in relationships. It's when they're ready to leave or they just left. That's when they come to me.
Okay, but from what I'm hearing, it sounds like this really does bring a lot of transformation, a lot of confidence, and helps your clients find the love that they deserve. But I'm just wondering if there are any men who are upset by the work that you're doing.
It's interesting that you say that because on my YouTube channel, some one of the most consistent engaged subscribers that I have is a man. I actually have a man that's in my program right now, and I've had others who have really interacted with me, and they say that the information that I share is helpful for them because as I'm coaching women, they are learning how to show up better for these women. um, I haven't really come across too many men that have been mad with the work that I'm doing because I haven't, I'll say this. I can't recognize that I've been the reason for someone's demise. So no one has ever come back to me and said, my relationship didn't work because of what you said, Portia. It's never been that. Because again, I mainly work with women who are single, who are wanting to get into something healthy. They're not still in a relationship. But I can imagine if someone is and they work with me and there goes the relationship, they probably would feel some kind of way. And I'm okay with that. Because if it means that, my client is getting the healing and the freedom that they need, then that's what matters most to me. It's fine.
And what advice can you have for someone who's in the audience who might be stuck, who is unable to get back into the dating pool, probably has some fears of rejection or maybe some past traumas? What maybe little bits of advice could you give?
Well, the first thing, and I was a communications major, so that's where my degree is, and I'm always listening to what is being said specifically, but also what isn't being said. So when the term unable is used, and I just had a conversation with one of my clients about this exact thing, we have to stop right there and say or ask, how am I disempowering myself from my natural God given ability to choose? Because it's not that we don't have a choice. I told my client the choice may not be easy, but it doesn't mean it's not there. It doesn't mean it's not there. So I could have said when I was going through everything that I was going through, the worst narcissistic relationship I'd ever been in 10 years ago, I could have allowed that to cripple me for life and say, there are no good men out there. They're all crazy. They just keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse. Without looking at my wiring that attracted me to a narcissistic partner to begin with, because we'll get into that. But I could have said that I don't feel safe to go and date. And maybe at some point that's true. Maybe it's not the right season to date.
Mm.
But give yourself a time frame for healing and then a time frame for strategy because I don't believe in just jumping out there and doing the same thing over, expecting different results. How are we showing up differently? What is our end game this time around? And what is the strategy that is going to help us get there? Because most people jump into relationships and dating not knowing how to play the game, not realizing that there are parameters around what you say you want. And so I don't think it's good to just heal for the sake of healing, because then you set yourself up to potentially be hurt all over again when you don't have the infrastructure for healthy boundaries and knowing who to attract versus who to let go. So those are important things when it comes to wanting to get back out there. I would say, first of all, heal from whatever past relationship trauma you had and give yourself a good timeline. I would say minimum 6 months, if not longer. And then before you go back out there, get your strategy down pat. So if you were used to the blue eyes and the blonde hair or the color contacts and the slim physique, if that was what you were drawn to, I'm going to tell you, get rid of the preference, because a lot of times preference is the problem. We are not looking for superficiality. When you want something that's deep and connective, you've got to go beyond the surface. So that's a part of the strategy. Do you want something that's long standing? Because looks are fleeting. Attraction is from one moment to the next. Today you're dressed in a suit and tomorrow you're in a janitor suit. And I'm like, not really as sexy as it was the night before. You can't look at people on the surface. You have to go beneath the surface. And I say, do it from day one. Because if you're only looking at what the outside shell is, you're missing the biggest part. And you want people to see you for all that you are and not just what you have to offer on the surface as well. So get that strategy together before you go back out there. Those would be my two biggest pieces of advice.
Something that I like from what you said is, well, I think, as a man, uh, from my point of view, I feel that infatuation plays a big role, a very big role. Of course, appearances, but here we're talking about thinking a little bit more, thinking a little bit deeper, also having that mindfulness, being strategic, and being aware. So this is great advice, not just for the audience, but shoot, I'm taking notes here too. I have my pen and paper. I'm here taking notes as well. So thank you so much for sharing that advice. And earlier you mentioned about narcissistic relationships, and also that cycle of a person might get out of a toxic or narcissistic relationship and attract the same type of person and get back in. How does one start to break that cycle?
Yeah. So I guess I could answer that question just telling a bit of my story. Part of me breaking the cycle, gosh, there's so much to it. But one of the things is starting to ask the question, why? Why is it me? Why am I the common denominator? And when you go down that rabbit trail of digging, 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 and becoming dissatisfied with saying, I don't get it. This just keeps happening to me. I guess that's how it just is. I got so tired of just living in that thought space. Like, wait a minute, no, because I'm seeing other people who have healthy relationships and it's not this craziness. Why is it always me? Once you can begin to be brave enough to ask the question, why am I the common denominator in these experiences? That's the beginning of breaking the cycle. Because as long as it's always pointing the finger or shining a light or a mirror to somebody else, you really don't take the inner power that you should to change the only part of the equation that you technically can, and that's yourself. So when I began to ask the question, why is it me? That's when I started looking at the hidden origins, the secret reasons why. And they were not apparent when I started. Because you know how you hear like attracts like? I'm going to talk about 3 ways that you can recognize why this situation is happening in order to break the cycle, because awareness is more than half the battle. But we think like attracts like. And I was always confused because I thought, oh, I I can't be narcissistic because I'm not crazy like this person is. So I don't understand why they're drawn to me. And what I learned, secret reason number one, was people often attract and entertain partners that they're complementary with, much like a lock and key. They are not the same, but one activates the other. And so when you're dealing with a narcissistic person, the first thing that I had to realize, the narcissistic profile of a person, someone who is constantly critical, condescending, they can't take criticism. They will gaslight you, turn things around on you, blame you for their mistakes, never take responsibility. Everybody else is the problem, never them. They think more highly of themselves when it's not even warranted. I can go on and on. This is what I experienced in this relationship that I was in over a decade ago. um, when you realize that you're with someone that you've been tolerating like this and trying to make feel better and walking on eggshells, I also had to realize the extreme that they're on matches the extreme that I'm on. A narcissist knows who they can prey on, someone who is so low and desperate and willing to go along with that type of dynamic. I had to get in touch with the fact that I really did not love myself like I needed to be dragging or allowing myself to be drugged through the mud by this individual. I didn't understand the depth of low self-esteem that I was operating in. I didn't understand that I had such low self-worth. I was looking for someone outside of me to validate me, to love me, to see me, to choose me. All of those things are what brought me to this individual. He saw the way that I dressed. He saw the way that I looked. He saw or heard my conversation. He saw how I was willing to turn a blind eye or accept one bit of information after the other that was very incriminating to him. But I was so wrapped into, oh, I have someone now. I'll just, ignore the fact that he has a history and a record, that he has, issues with keeping a job, that he lied to me about X, Y, and Z, that he just kind of flashed and went off on me, that like all of this stuff, it just comes out over time. And they can tell how lowly and desperate you are by the fact that you keep putting up with and going along with it. And I had to realize, okay, there's something within me that is desperate enough to stay with someone like this. That's reason number one, is looking at self. Why am I still in something like this? And it is tearing me down. It is tearing me down. The second truth is understanding, again, where did this come from? How did I become the person that normalizes this behavior? And this is another hidden reason, looking at your family of origin. And I was also confused on this because when I was a child, I had an absentee father. And I thought, oh, well, if I've got father issues that are healed, then why am I still attracting narcissistic men? It doesn't make sense. And what I learned is the sexes and the roles can change, and sometimes they're reversed. My father is not a narcissist. What I didn't realize was it was my mother, who I was raised by, who exhibited the narcissistic tendencies that I was just recently able to acknowledge and admit. That's where the wiring came from. It's the energy. It doesn't even matter the sex or the role or the parent. That was the one who wired me to walk on eggshells, to accept dysfunctional behavior, to be okay with attracting and being with someone who was tearing me down, who was ignoring all of my achievements, who didn't value what I brought to the relationship dynamic. That was where I got a revelation like, oh, wow. It doesn't necessarily, if you're a woman dealing with a man, it doesn't necessarily mean you have father issues. It means that you might actually have mother issues, and vice versa. If you're a man dealing with crazy, toxic, narcissistic women, it could be that your mother was that way, or it could be that your father was that way, or it could be that you watched your father deal with the same type of women. And so you're just repeating the same cycle that you've seen. Third reason, and the biggest point of awareness is realizing, you're going from self to family, but then the influencing institutions that preside over the nuclear family. And this is where I connect with a lot of the work that you have on your podcast, because I had to realize if it's not cultural indoctrination, a lot of times it's religious. Because when you think about toxic theology and toxic relationships, they often are the same. And that was another layer of discovery and healing, because I had to religiously deconstruct all the ways that I watched my mother subject herself to narcissistic behavior in these religious spaces and then become that. I watched her be told that she wasn't valuable as a woman in these spaces. I grew up hearing the preachings and the teachings: your righteousness is as filthy rags, you're unworthy of salvation, you have to sacrifice yourself, you have to worship someone else and esteem them higher than yourself. Like, all of these things are made to keep you small, to keep you blindly believing in something without asking the questions. So you don't do your homework and your research on a person. You're just happy that they show up and they're there. But you're going along with stuff despite how you actually feel on the inside. You're told not to trust your heart, that the heart is wicked above all. Lean not to your own understanding. Like, these are scriptures that I have heard, and it teaches you to not look into and trust your own intuition. So realizing, oh my gosh, so much of the religious programming I've had is narcissistic and toxic. Well, it's no wonder. You apply that type of stuff to every area of your life. So I showed up as the people pleaser, trying to show my value, trying to show my worth, trying to perform for people to accept me and to take me in and to choose me and to see me, because that's what I was programmed to do from church, from my mother, now down to a man. So I'm going to stop because I feel like I have just spit out a whole bunch.
No, thank you for sharing what you've just shared, because it really breaks down what many people are going through. I was going to say might be going through, but no, there are many people who are going through this sort of dynamic of all that you mentioned, and but there's help. There are steps, strategies to not only heal, but also to transform. So you're offering the help, and that's a beautiful thing. But my question now is, where can people go to find the work that you offer? Because it sounds like you're doing amazing stuff.
Yes. So people can find me on YouTube. My moniker there is Porsche, the communicator. Porsche spelled like the car. So Porsche, the communicator, two words. And then if they'd like to get personally in touch with me to see my program offerings, to learn a bit more about me, they can go to PorscheAngelCoaching.net. Again, my name is spelled like the car, PorscheAngel coaching.net. And yeah, would love to connect.
And your YouTube, you already mentioned that. You also do you have Instagram, TikTok, or
I
just YouTube?
I'm Portia the Communicator on both Instagram and TikTok. I'm not as active on those. I'm also on Threads. I'll pop in occasionally every so often, but the place where I'm the most active is YouTube.
Okay, so it sounds like you're doing a lot of work and you're evolving. This just started last year, you said, when you got into this full time. But how do you see yourself evolving in the future? Do you see yourself perhaps writing a book, doing podcasts, doing speaking events?
Absolutely. Definitely speaking events, which will probably happen before the book. Well, if I'm being honest, I already have written a book. It's an ebook. It was inspired by my late cat. It's called The Cat Who Cried Listen, and it's a free ebook. Actually, you can get it on Apple Books. Um, but yeah, it's the tagline: "Feline tidbits for humans who don't get life or who don't get it." I forget. It's been a while since I wrote that. But as far as the work that I'm currently doing now, I do feel like there probably is a book in the works. But certainly speaking, I've had visions of doing TED Talks and things of that nature. So I welcome the opportunity to be able to do things like that now and in the near future. I suppose that's the purpose, or one of the purposes, of building my YouTube library up with loads of content, so that, it's not a deal with choosing topics to speak on, for things like that.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because if there's someone who is in the audience and is listening, and maybe you have connections with TED Talk or maybe you have some speaking engagements, maybe this is the time people can reach out to you and find you on YouTube, also on your website, and to really just connect and just to work with you and to have more transformation because what you're doing is really transforming not only relationships, but you're also transforming lives by all that you do. So thank you for sharing about your journey, the work that you do. And now, before we conclude, can you? I have. I'm getting all mixed up. Before we wrap this up, I have a question that I ask all of my guests, and that is, Portia, what is your truth that heals?
Okay. My truth that heals is that I was always worthy of love. I am love. I don't have to perform for it. I don't have to convince anyone of it. And when I decided to stop buying into the belief systems that tried to convince me of otherwise, that's when I started to receive all and experience all that was rightfully mine from the beginning.
Thank you so much, Portia, for sharing all that you share with us today. And for those in the audience, please go ahead and like, subscribe, comment, because that always helps the algorithm. Also, give a review if you're listening to this on Spotify. That always helps me as well. 5 stars, hopefully. And please share so that other people may also encounter the amazing work and the truth presented by our guest today, Portia Angel. And Portia, thank you so much for being a wonderful guest on the Truth That Heals podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Ryan. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate you.